Just weeks before her death, Queen Elizabeth took one final ride on her beloved pony Emma, knowing it would be the last time they met. In a deeply moving account, her long-standing stud groom Terry Pendry reveals for the first time that the former monarch was so frail and tiny that he had to help her off her mount, even though she had bravely insisted on climbing into the saddle herself. And instead of riding by her side as usual, the sovereign asked him to walk alongside so she wouldn't fall. But Her Majesty hadn't lost one iota of her spirit, Mr. Pendry adds, even teasingly admonishing him for daring to mention her age. He captured the beautiful, deeply personal moment in a photograph, which he later took up to her at Windsor Castle, where the Queen stuck it in her scrapbook with a handwritten note. Mr. Pendry, 74, was speaking in an interview with the new Rosebud with Giles Brandreth podcast, which is out today. The groom rode with the Queen for 28 years and was one of her most loved and trusted servants. On July 18, 2022, less than 8 weeks before her death, she came down to the stables as usual to see Emma, bringing the steed a bag of carrots. There was, Mr. Pendry believes, a quiet sense of finality to the 96-year-old's purpose, although nothing was said. The servant, who at one time looked after around 100 of the royal family's horses and ponies, says, "The very last time with her wasn't a ride, I walked. She was quite frail." She actually ended up being smaller than Queen Elizabeth, her mother, her last 4 years when she was quite poorly. Referring to the mounting block she used, he explained, "As she aged, I used to have to once a year put another step on it. She could go up and step onto Emma, but I always used to have to lift her off. I was on my feet walking round with her, and she looked down to me and she said, 'This hasn't happened to me since I was a princess.' I said, 'What?' She said, 'Someone walking alongside me like this.' And I said, 'If you want me to step away, I'll step away, or I'll go and get another pony and I'll ride with you.' She said, 'No, just walk with me.' And I said, 'Let me take a picture of you.' She said, 'What do you want to do that for?' I said, 'Well, you'd like one for your scrapbook. Your pony's 26, you're 96. That has to be a record.' To this, the late Queen replied, 'I suppose you're right.' Mr. Pendry added, 'I took it up that evening.' She would paste it in her little scrapbook and write a sentence underneath. He says that despite the underlying sadness of the occasion, the Queen was as sparky as ever, adding, 'She came down for a chat and a final goodbye to Emma. Whether she was kind of thinking about things, I don't know, but she looked at me and said, "You were very rude to me yesterday." I said, "Your Majesty, I'm awfully sorry, but what do you mean rude? If I was, I apologize profusely. It wouldn't have been intentional and I apologize. Was it something I said?" "Yes," she said, "it was." I said, "Well, what was it?" She said, "You said my age," and then she burst into fits of laughter. That was just her. Last time I ever saw her. I had an inkling that was probably the last time I was going to see her. When I used to lift her off her pony, she was getting lighter and lighter and frailer. Despite the deterioration in her health in later years, Mr. Pendry says he persuaded her that she needed exercise and fresh air, and he would sneak her felt pony into Frogmore Gardens, adjoining Windsor Castle, for her to ride. As she neared her 80s, he had already talked her into switching to the small felt pony from her much taller horses. Emma became her best-loved equine companion and captured the nation's heart in one of the most touching moments at the Queen's funeral, when he stood with her by the long walk in Windsor as the coffin passed. Mr. Pendry said he saw the Queen on July 19, the day after she jokingly admonished him, when she popped by before going to Balmoral for the summer. He continued, "She drove down on the 19th, not to ride. I'd already said my goodbyes on the 18th and said, 'Enjoy Balmoral.' I said, 'I wish I was coming, but you're not going to ride. There's no point.' The Queen still invited him, although he thinks her motive was his wife Sue's raspberry jam, which she adored.